One intervention, we're going to look at the impact on 50 diseases at one time in a mega study. Most drug studies will look at one intervention, one disease, and then you're done. And you spend billions of dollars doing that, you market a drug.
Hello, and welcome to the Pacific Channel, where you learn how to be, do, and have whatever you want through the power of the law of attraction, meditation, and more. I'm your host, Steve Doherty. Today's audio clip is about Dr. Joe Dispenza and Dr. Emil, I believe that's how you pronounce it, discussing scientific studies that they are doing in their community. Quantum 1.0 is about studying 1,000 humans meditating. Dr. Emil talks about how eager the community members are to participate in these studies and how they have easily gotten more than enough volunteers very fast. He also talks about the amazing 35,000 square foot lab that they got to use for Quantum 2.0 and how happy he was to get many volunteers to allow them to take blood samples before and after Dr. Joe's events because there is so much information stored in the blood that they can analyze. He will also talk about how happy he is that they will be able to study 18 diseases with at least 30 people with each one of those diseases. Normally, you just track one or two diseases, not so many at one time. The other thing that they talk about is how quickly people are expected to change and heal, which is only 7 days, and how that is an amazingly short amount of time for anything to work, whether that be a drug or even just regular meditation. An additional thing that this doctor will talk about is how the words we use have an impact on the thinking patterns we create, and how they are working with a linguist named Jeff King on this. The whole idea is that the way in which you use words may influence the transformative endpoint. They will talk about the word felt and how that word may be used to transform one's feelings. The other interesting thing that they talk about is that UC San Diego is going to look at muscle features and other things that change after a person attends a Dr. Joe event. This gets into an interesting discussion about how people who attend Dr. Joe's events may actually look very different by the end of the week. This gets into an interesting discussion about how people who attend Dr. Joe's events may actually look very different by the end of the week-long workshop. In other words, their actual facial muscles change. Dr. Joe then chimes in after Dr. Emil and says that even people's voices have been known to change after the event. Let's listen to Dr. Emil and Dr. Joe discuss all of this now.
Now, so that's a good lead into sort of the research and the magnanimity of what we're after. So in January, we launched Quantum 1.0. So Quantum, we're starting to name all our studies. So Quantum is the quest to analyze 1,000 humans meditating. And at the time we thought, how are we going to get 1,000 people to join the study? We had 978 people join us in January in Marco Island. We were small potatoes then, right? We only asked them to do two main things: put on a little Garmin device to track them biometrically throughout the week and respond to some surveys. And then the more volunteered, excited individuals could give us some biospecimens so we could tie sort of your self-perception of your health to actual biological endpoints. That was a groundbreaking study on its own. And as the year evolved, we decided that we wanted to run a Quantum 2.0, but put it on steroids and go to the next level. So Quantum 2.0 launched in Orlando. I think the numbers were astonishing when we first came in. I think it was open 24 hours and we already had 400 plus participants sign up, do their consents, and be ready to go. One of the things that has just enamored me about this community is how they want to participate, to move this science along, and to be our guinea pigs. And it's really important that we have this access. To do essentially by the end of this year, it's almost a 1,800 subject study that Quantum involves, would take 15 to 20 years in academic science to do this. I'm involved in a clinical study right now. We're recruiting just under 200 patients, and it's taken us 5 years to do that. We recruited 400 patients in 24 hours for this study. I mean, that's just astronomical. By the time we got to Orlando, The numbers turned out to be about 820 subjects we looked at. Um, it's the biggest lab space I've ever worked in. My lab space that was crafted was a 35,000 square foot exhibit hall that we then partitioned off into rooms. And it was slick. I mean, it was well designed. People walked through it. They were all sort of complimenting the group on how smooth the thing was. And this is moving 650 people in a day through 7, 8 stations where they're doing height, weight, blood pressure, where they're scraping their cheeks and spitting cells into a tube, where they're getting their blood drawn, where grandmas and others are trying to get 3 apps on their phone active and working and get their garment set up. And so it was a production. And the what we think we can solve and answer through this is mind-boggling. So at the end of the day, we ended up with, like I said, around 820 subjects. Out of that, we consented a few people on site. Because we had all the blood work pre-planned, we couldn't include them in the blood draws. So we have about 750 clean blood draws pre-post on individuals. This is a huge feat. Blood has so much information on it. We're looking at the DNA, the RNA, the proteins, the metabolites. To have that in 750 people is quite dramatic. Over the last couple of years, we've focused purposely on the healthy individual in meditation. And we did that for a reason, right? We wanted to define what a healthy individual looks like during these events to give us a target to help move other people along to that path, right? How can you biologically convert someone who's got cancer, diabetes, hypertension, anxiety, depression to look more and more like the healthy individual? The happy side effect of quantum, which we were anticipating, but not at this level, is that we would have the healthies in there, but we'd also have all the other diseases that are represented in these events, people who are coming to find a way to recalibrate their bodies and to reinvent their bodies. When we first looked at quantum, I was shocked. We had 18 diseases where we had 30 people or more represented in each of those diseases. 30 is this magic number that we can actually do some real statistical analysis in and make associations and inferences and those sorts of things. And 18 diseases, when you look at everything that's represented in quantum, we have about 50 diseases. And so between those two studies, the one in January and the one we just did a couple weeks ago, which I slept basically the whole day Monday when I got back. It's exhausting. We have 50 diseases that we're looking at, and I suspect that 18 is going to get even more. We'll probably have about 30 diseases between the two quantums, where we have 30 people or more. One intervention, we're going to look at the impact on 50 diseases at one time in a mega study. Most drug studies will look at one intervention, one disease, and then you're done. And you spend billions of dollars doing that, you market a drug. Here we've got one intervention that has this mega effect and 50 diseases. The ability to look at outcomes in that many things that the human condition suffers against, it's just, I can't wait to see what happens.
And the concept of a drug study usually being a duration of the minimum of 60 days, we're looking at effects that could take place in 7 days. And I think when we show our initial data to a lot of other researchers and scientists, and they see the changes that we've gotten in studying some of the past events that we've done, research-wise, I think their most common remark is that, wow, 7 days you're seeing these changes. It is pretty unbelievable for many people.
Yeah.
And can you talk about some of the things we did at Quantum 2.0, or we talk, some of the other things we studied that advanced it from Quantum 1.0?
Yeah, so we did the stool and cheek scrape collections like we did in the first one. As I've talked at multiple events and other places, the microbiome is a hot area of research right now. We really want to focus on how the mind controls the gut. It's always been the opposite, right? The gut controls everything else in your body, and we're really looking in our research to see if thoughts can repattern the microbiome. Early evidence suggests that it can in various diseases, and we're very excited to see, are there limitations, or is this an unlimited manipulation of the microbiome that we can do? The cheek scrapes, of course, will give us some epigenetic data. We're doing some mitochondrial assessments on these as well, and so that's sort of a new thing. Where we expand beyond quantum 1 and quantum 2 is the blood collection. And so we did 2 tubes of blood. One was an RNA DNA tube where we can isolate RNA DNA, look at gene level changes in blood cells. And then we isolated our standard plasma tubes. And so in plasma, we can look at metabolites, exosomes, you name it, we've got access to it. We were just talking yesterday about what undergrad we're going to dupe into doing 750 times 2 samples, where they literally sit at the machine and run them on our nanosite to see what kind of exosomes and particles are being created. To have that for 50 plus diseases is going to be amazing. So in addition to this, we added a few additional components. One of the things that we're very interested in are low energy, low yield, low expense kinds of things that we can start moving the needle in helping people create some biofeedback. One of the areas that we're very interested in, and this is sort of a betrayal of our thoughts, is sometimes these thoughts come out and sometimes they don't. And this is language, right? The words we use have an impact on the thinking pattern that we create. And so we're working with a linguist in Oklahoma, Jeff King, who's developed this algorithm where they can look at textual language and determine if someone is transforming. And he's done some early analysis around some of the cancer subjects we've been looking at, and he's come up with this hot hub of activity around a particular word. The word felt seems to have some movement in this population. And there's a group of subjects that use felt in a physical sense. I physically felt better. And there's a group of subjects that use felt to create an emotional connection. And so the idea is that the way in which you use words may be things that lead to this transformative endpoint. So in this language capture that we did, we'll be able to use Jeff's algorithm to create a word pattern and see if these are uniquely different in individuals before they start the event and when they end the event. And then since we have the video, we're going to work with people at UCSD to look at muscle features and other things that are descriptive of what happens during the event. I've had multiple people come up to me over the last 2 years and say, you look very different from 2 years ago. I'm like, I'm still as round as I was. I've got more stubble on my face. But other than that, I mean, I don't really notice a huge difference. But your face changes at these events. Sometimes in a week, you are unrecognizable to people around you. And so we want to capture some of these subtle changes in muscle features that happen, and we'll have that in the video component. And then, of course, sound, right? We have the sound files that we'll be able to look at and analyze and see if intonation and other things are different as well.
Cool. Can I interrupt you right here, Emil? Because you packed in a lot there. So we had an opportunity to sit down with Jeff, who is the expert in transformational language, and the algorithm they look at is, in particular, that they developed, is able to really listen to every word and calculate what it is that leads a person, or what is it that they could correlate with that person's personal change or transformation. And they studied several of the testimonials that we have, and the machine, it came down to that word that they felt something, that it was a feeling or that they felt it. And it's such an important thing for us to understand, because the feeling is typically the end product of some experience, right? It's usually the sensory feedback that's coming through our 5 different pathways, our receptors, and the chemistry that's created we call a feeling or an emotion. In this particular circumstance, where a person has a transformational moment, they are having some type of change in their feeling, but the primary source of it is not coming from anything in their external environment. And this is really important, because many times during a healing, a coherence healing, or many times during a personal mystical moment, when we ask people to give their testimony, they keep talking about over and over again, and I just felt this incredible amount of love that I've never felt before. I felt this sense of awe, or there's such appreciation for life, and then I say to them, will you please tell them that you came in a wheelchair and you're out of your wheelchair, or that you couldn't move your arm because of a stroke and now you can move your arm? They keep going back to the feeling, and if the environment signals the gene, and it does, And the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion. And the person is actually creating that emotion or experiencing that emotion independent of the environment, and they're signaling genes ahead of their environment. And actually that begins to produce a change in their biology. So part of it is somatic, in a sense that it feels physical, like you could have it really physically in your body. And then part of it is very emotional, that is almost transcendental and etheric, that it's something that's beyond what we physically feel. And he was so forthcoming in talking to us about this, and many times we know this just from the species of human beings. There's a science behind studying facial expressions. When you're angry, when you're disgusted, when you're impatient, when you're fearful, when you're resentful, when you're withholding truth, there's very specific facial expressions that many scientists that have spent a lot of time in really forensic studies. And what happens many times when people have these transformational experiences is that their facial patterns change because they're not locked in that same place of stasis emotionally. And then the tone of their voice also can be changed as well. So we spent a lot of time talking to Jeff at dinner the first night, because I was so intrigued by and he very much into studying the work that we're doing on his own, and studies transformation and learning. And so great conversation. The concept of the microbiome that we're studying also is the symbiosis that takes place really between the cells of our body, self and non-self, these living organisms that have hosted on our physical body. And typically when there's a good balance between the health of the body and the health of the microbiome, there's a great symbiosis. But when the body's out of balance, out of homeostasis, and it's in stress, certain colonies of bacteria tend to proliferate, and their primary intent is to survive. And they want to colonize and multiply and grow, and they want to be in power. And so there's a lot of research that shows that they can begin to influence cravings in the body, choices that we make. And people don't even understand why they do it, but it's really because the microbiome is influencing the person's choices so that they have the best advantage. And when we did Quantum 1.0, we saw a significant change in certain microbiome that's correlated with cancer, that's correlated with inflammation, correlated with response to cancer treatment. These are really important things that you typically don't see unless you change your diet, unless you go into a very strict selection of food choices to give the microbiome a chance to balance and the body a chance to move back into homeostasis, and that takes time. And so when you see these quick changes in a very short amount of time, you have to understand that on some level the brain or the nervous system is moving back into homeostasis and balance, and there's this kind of protective role that takes place that actually suppresses the growth of certain microbiomes and gives the body a chance really to get its strength back and to sustain itself. The last thing is when Dr. Hemmel was talking about cheek scrapes, we're doing that actually to study gene expression. The gene expression we're looking at is to see is it possible to change your gene expression in 7 days, along with looking at the cells that are on the body. We look at the gene expression in the blood. It's a ton of data that we can really make some strong statements about if we're able to reproduce the study. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, Dr. Hemmel. I just wanted to kind of catch everybody up.
So what is important about this video clip, and how can it help you? In other words, what is the message and what do you need to take away from it to get the most benefit? Personally, I don't really care that much about all of their testing. I already know it works. What I want to know is how. How do you get into that totally blissed out place when you meditate? How can you do it consistently? And how can we make real change for the better now, not later? A lot of us don't have the time or the money to do one of Dr. Joe's events. It takes a full 7 days and it costs a couple $1,000s. So that's kind of a barrier for some of us. Well, as these two guys were alluding to, so much of it has to do with your thoughts. what thoughts you choose to think and feel. When Dr. Joe leads people into deep meditation, what does he say and do to get people to let go of their negative thoughts, step into the quantum field, and create a mystical experience, a physical healing and an emotional healing? He gets people to turn their attention and focus to the energy of space all around them, to the quantum field. As it turns out, the key seems to be in turning your attention and your focus outside of yourself, outside of your normal life, outside of who you are, what your job or career is, your house, your car, and all of your belongings. When you focus on everything outside of yourself into the quantum where it's unknown and it's all vibration or wave instead of particle and matter, something magical happens. It's almost as if you get into closer touch with your inner being, with your higher self, with source energy itself. The reason why this works is because who you really are is much more than what you have been allowing yourself to be. You must start seeing yourself for who you really are, a powerful, spiritual, divine being, a piece of God, a ray of God. Who you really are is a blissed out, loving, caring, full of life being. And what Dr. Joe is tapping into is helping people to get to that place, to step into the quantum field outside of the matrix of 3D and physical reality. That's all. That's all that is going on here. But perhaps what may help you the most is to get you to see it from that perspective the next time that you meditate. Go into meditation with the idea of leaving behind your entire 3D world and connecting with your inner being or higher self. Once you connect with your inner being or higher self, those blissed out, wonderful feelings will powerfully come over you. I'm talking about what Dr. Joe calls that mystical moment, when people are getting a physical and emotional upgrade, when these magical healings take place. But don't do it to try to manifest your healing or a car or a house or a lot of money. Do it because it feels good. And then the healing, the car, the house, and the money will come. In other words, use meditation to connect with your inner being for the feeling of bliss. And when you do this correctly, you can actually receive messages and impulses from your inner being. But those messages and impulses may seem too small and insignificant. Follow it anyway. In almost every case that it happens, what your inner being is doing is giving you very small steps to guide you to all that you want. So use meditation to connect with your inner being and then create from there. That is what Dr. Joe is helping people to do. If you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. And if you know of anyone who could use some encouragement to meditate, please share this video with them. It just might change their life. Thank you for watching, and the next time you meditate, imagine that you're connecting with your inner being or higher self, because you are. Have a great day or night.